All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to NAB Show New York. Welcome to the NAB Show Tech Chat Theater. And today we are starting with Penthera. And we have lovely Scott here to talk about Penthera. And our session title is Solving Monetization Problems for SSAI, DAI in VOD. Scott Halpert is the Senior Vice President of Product and Partnerships at Penthera. Penthera is a leading SaaS company that provides video streaming solutions to OTT providers across 36 countries and over 150 million devices. And Scott is a tech executive with deep business development strategy and product experience. His career includes senior roles in startups and mid-sized companies in the media, mobile, and ad tech software sectors. Scott has been responsible for launching new products and developing new business lines for companies such as IPNWeb, Velti, CMGI, and others that have resulted in millions of dollars in revenue. His experience spans publishing, digital media, advertising, technology, OTT, and CTV. So he's Senior Vice President, Products and Partnerships at Penthera. Scott is responsible for the ideation, development, and commercialization of Penthera's advertising products and heads up the company's strategic partner initiatives. So welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
Fast channels are getting a lot of attention. So how do you see their interplay with video on demand?
Yeah, so fast is obviously really quite a hot topic nowadays. And part of that is because it provided an easy mechanism for either content owners or people that license content to get into the streaming space and to be able to, frankly, make some money. What we see today are a number of trends that are occurring in the fast space that really actually relate to VOD. So one is that the big platform companies, whether it's a Roku, Amazon, Samsung, LG, they're all starting to build their own fast channels. And what they've done is they've looked at what's been successful for all the independent upstart companies, and then now they're going and licensing the same or similar content, and they're going to have their owned and operated channels. So that's raising the bar in terms of like bar to entry for starting a fast channel or even maintaining a footprint on some of these big platforms. The other thing that we see is that, and Alan Wolk at TREV brought this up, is that fast is being used by big media companies like an NBC or a Paramount to drive usage of VOD. And so, for example, you might have the first show of Yellowstone, of the new season of Yellowstone, that's available on a fast channel, but to see the rest of the episodes, you have to watch it as a video on demand. And the reason that they want to do that is that while fast is quite popular and there's a lot of traction and a lot of delivery across fast, it's a lean back type of experience. In other words, people turn it on, maybe they're paying attention, maybe they're not. But with video on demand, and frankly something similar akin to that is live sporting events, where people are choosing to watch that particular show at that particular time, they're engaged in it. And what that means is that you have a higher engaged audience, which drives more value out of the advertising inventory. So large publishers are starting to look at how can I use fast and the ubiquity of distribution of fast and the sort of low barrier to entry for consumers to start to discover content via fast to drive usage of my higher value assets.
So there's a lot of focus on content options when it comes to VOD, but the quality of the viewer experience is also crucial.
Yep.
With that in mind, what are your thoughts on which protocol, ClientSide ad insertion or Server-Side ad insertion, offering the best viewer experience? Which one is it and why?
Yeah, so look, there are cost advantages to using client-side ad insertion, but when you look at it from the end user experience and when you look at it from the advertiser and ensuring high quality delivery, server-side advertising is a clear winner. What we've seen is, look, server-side advertising is the approach you need to take for low latency scenarios like live streaming of sporting events or live content, or for linear events. What we start to see now are that the larger publishers are moving moving their VOD libraries to server-side because they're not subject to all of the faults and breakage points that occur with the player handoff that happens in client-side. They're not exposed to being blocked by ad blockers that someone might be using at their, on their device or at their VPN level. And so the trend today amongst the bigger publishers is towards server-side, and that's also partially driven by demand by advertisers. And the reason for that is that advertisers have a higher degree of assurity that their ad is not only actually going to get delivered, but it's not going to cause the stream to stall and the quality, the image quality of the ad when it does get delivered, because it is an AVR asset, will be as high as possible, akin to what you're seeing in, say, a 4K stream. Even if the ad isn't 4K, it'll still be delivered as a high HD asset.
Okay, so what are some of the challenges and opportunities from SSAI, DAI, and VOD, and what role does programmatic play in this?
Yeah, so programmatic for a lot of publishers has become increasingly important. But when you add programmatic into the mix, it adds additional layers of complexity. And when you look at server-side ad insertion, whether it's SSAI or what Google calls DAI, the biggest challenge that we see in terms of what we're focused on in VOD has to do with the timing of when ad decisions are made. So in a VOD stream, when you're using server-side ad insertion, in order to enable the user to scrub back and forth, in other words, fast forward or rewind within the stream, and to see the total duration of the video asset, you need to hand them, their player by extension, you have to hand them an entire manifest. And that entire manifest has to have all of the ads for that entire stream, whether it's 30 minutes long or 2.5 hours long. They have to be in place at the very beginning of that process. So that process and all the ad decisioning occurs in between the time the user presses play on the device and the first frame of that video showing up. And that compression of time has a number of effects. One, it causes the stream to take a little bit of time to get started because you have to make a bunch of ad decisions, and that takes a few seconds. But the other problem is that that process, which is unlike anything else that occurs in the digital ecosystem, with the possible exception of digital out of home, where you have a bunch of decisioning systems, ad servers, programmatic systems, that are focused on how do we make decisions in real time. That's what they were built to do. You're now asking them to make a decision now for something that's not going to be happening for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. And that has a significant effect on how they make decisions, what campaigns are available for those decisions that get locked in at the single point of time, how the programmatic systems are buying against that inventory, and what it results in is suboptimal, what I would describe as suboptimal performance in terms of revenue generation for publishers. You have scenarios where you have underfill because buying shifts to the head of the stream. You have scenarios where you have problems with something called render rate, which is simply, it's a simple metric, which is how many ads actually were viewed divided by how many ads were inserted in the stream. And on the surface, it looks like a metric that illustrates opportunity cost. How much could I have made if someone watched the entire stream? What it really turns out to be is much more insidious than that, because the programmatic systems are modeling that, and when they see low render rates, which gives them a low assurity that their ad is actually going to get delivered on that particular spot, they tend not to bid on it, so they change their bidding behavior. So all in all, it creates a bunch of problems in terms of how do we generate revenue. And it also makes it very difficult from an operational standpoint, because you have to segregate VOD campaigns, because they need long time to live windows for the advertisements, 2 hours as an example, versus just a few minutes for live or linear. And so you can't easily flow budget between VOD and linear and have sort of this dynamic relationship between all of your distribution. You have to manage it separately.
So you mentioned Penthera's new product, SecondLook. Tell me more about it and the opportunities it presents to AVOD or AVOD publishers.
Yeah, so the first iteration of the product is really designed to do something that seems kind of simple, and it's fairly subtle, but it's complicated from a technical standpoint, which is how do we move the time of decisioning from in between the pressing play and the first frame of the video showing up to right before each ad pod is going to run. And so I'll talk about it at a very high level. We have a white paper that's on our web page that you can read, sort of detailed description of the logic and what the problems are and how it operates. But essentially, we're moving the time of the decision. And so what we're doing is we're offering each ad pod up individually in serial at the time that it's, well, essentially just before it's going to run. And that has a number of meaningful effects. So at an ad server, campaigns that wouldn't be able to get into a stream because of their budgeting and pacing constraints now have multiple opportunities to get into that same stream and reach that same user. The programmatic systems, when they bid on the first ad pod, there are going to be a bunch of them that are trying to get in there that don't actually make it into that ad pod. In the old scenario, they would never make it into the stream. Today, with our product SecondLook, we can offer them the opportunity to get into the second ad pod when that's going to run. We've built it to be completely interoperable with any publisher that's using server-side ad insertion. It doesn't disrupt the sort of workflow between the SSAI vendor and the ad stack. So we're not making any decisions. What we're doing is we're enabling those systems to operate much more efficiently. And what we see is better outcomes. So higher render rates, less discrepancies due to timeout issues, more participation by advertisers at each ad pod. Because, again, you might have 10 advertisers that are trying to get into the first ad pod. Let's say 4 of them do. Well, 6 of them still want that user, still want that session, still want that content adjacency. So when we offer the second ad pod, just a few seconds ahead of when it's going to run, not only are they pretty certain it's going to actually be delivered, but they have another chance to reach that user. And by increasing advertiser participation, we actually drive up average CPM for the ad pod through competition.
Interesting. Fascinating. Okay, URL for the white paper?
Just go to Penthera, penthera.com.
Beautiful.
And it's right on the homepage.
All right. Scott, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that's Scott Halpert from Penthera. I'm Christina Clapp. Thank you so much for joining us at the NAB Show New York Tech Chat Theater.